Hello, and welcome back to Today English Podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a lesson. Your support truly helps this channel grow. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. This is Today's English Podcast, and today I want to take you on a long, gentle journey, a journey into the heart of a promise you once made to yourself. Maybe it was a small promise, like drinking more water, reading for 10 minutes, or waking up a little earlier. Or maybe it was a big promise, like learning English, changing your career, becoming healthier, or starting a new chapter in your life. We all make promises, and we all feel excited in the beginning. In the beginning, everything feels bright. We see the future clearly, and we imagine a better version of ourselves waiting just a little ahead. But then, slowly, something happens. Life becomes busy. Things become heavy. We forget. We delay. We promise ourselves tomorrow, and that tomorrow becomes another tomorrow and then another. And one day, we look at the promise we made and think, why is it so hard to stay consistent? Why do I start strong but lose my way? So today, I want to walk with you through this feeling. I want to tell you a story. And maybe this story will help you understand something important about consistency, not in books, not in theories, but inside the simple, real moments of life. Let us begin with a quiet morning, a moment when a young man named Daniel decides that it is time for a change. 2. A quiet morning and a simple goal. Daniel is 27 years old, and for months he has been telling himself that he will change his routine. He will learn English every day. He will read. He will exercise. He will build new habits. But every time he tries, he stops. He feels guilty for stopping, so he waits for the perfect moment to start again. And that perfect moment never comes. But this morning feels different. The air is soft. The world is quiet. And Daniel sits at the edge of his bed with a deep breath. He takes a notebook and writes one simple sentence. I want to stay consistent. Not perfect. Not fast. Just consistent. He feels good as he writes it. He feels hope. And for a moment, it seems like this time will be different. But as he stands up, there is a soft voice inside him, a voice that whispers, "You said this before." And suddenly he is afraid. Afraid that he will fail again. Afraid that he will disappoint himself again. Yet he continues. He makes a cup of tea, sits by the window, and plays an English listening practice. He listens for 10 minutes. His mind wanders. He feels tired. But he finishes. And in this very small moment, something quietly begins. 3. The first challenge. But consistency is a strange thing. It does not fall apart in big moments. It does not break because of huge failures. It breaks in small, silent moments when no one is watching. 2 days later, Daniel wakes up a little late. He feels lazy. He does not want to study. He tells himself, I'll do it later. But later becomes evening. And evening becomes, I'm too tired. And suddenly he feels that old heaviness again. That confusion. That disappointment. He thinks, why can't I keep a simple promise? Why is it so easy to stop? These thoughts feel heavy inside him. But something new happens that night. Instead of giving up completely, he sits down and listens for 5 minutes. Only 5. Not 10. Not 20. Just 5. And after those 5 minutes, he realizes something important. Consistency is not about strength. It is about returning. Returning again and again, even in small ways, even when you do not feel like it. 4. A small discovery. Daniel begins to understand something about goals. Goals feel big. Goals feel far away. But consistency lives in small steps. The next morning, he decides not to focus on studying English for an hour. Instead, he focuses on showing up. Just showing up. Some days for 10 minutes. Some days for 20. Some days for 5. And slowly, something strange begins to change inside him. He starts to feel proud of small victories. He starts to trust himself again. He starts to believe that he can keep promises, not because he is perfect, but because he is trying. And one afternoon, as he walks through a quiet park listening to English audio, he suddenly smiles. He feels light. He feels calm. He feels consistent. For the first time in years. 5. The setback, but life always tests us. And 1 week later, Daniel's routine breaks again. Not because of laziness, but because of a busy week at work. Stress. Extra hours. A project that takes all of his energy. He comes home exhausted. Too tired to learn. Too tired to even think. And after 3 days without practice, he feels panic again. He tells himself it's over. I broke the chain. But something inside him is stronger now. Something inside him remembers the feeling of those small victories. And on the 4th day, even though he is tired, even though he wants to sleep, he sits down and listens for 2 minutes. Only 2. But those 2 minutes save him. Because consistency is not about doing more. It is about never fully stopping. It is about keeping your promise alive, even with the smallest breath. 6. The realization one morning, after many small wins and small failures, Daniel wakes up and realizes something important. Staying consistent is not about discipline. It is not about motivation. It is not even about time. It is about identity. If you believe you are someone who gives up, you will give up. If you believe you are someone who returns, you will always return. And so Daniel begins to change the way he talks to himself. He stops saying, I'm bad at studying. He stops saying, I can't stay consistent. Instead, he says, I am someone who tries. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who returns. And slowly, this becomes true. 7. A new way of living. Weeks pass. Then months. And something surprising happens. Daniel's English improves, not in a dramatic way, not suddenly, not overnight, but quietly. Naturally. Deeply. He understands more. He speaks with more confidence. He listens more easily. And more importantly, he trusts himself. He trusts the small steps. He trusts the slow progress. He trusts the idea that consistency is not a perfect line. It is a gentle wave. And he learns to ride that wave with patience. 8. Reflection and the truth about consistency. And now, I want to speak to you directly, the person listening right now. Maybe you feel like Daniel. Maybe you start strong but stop quickly. Maybe you want to change, but you feel stuck between excitement and fear. If that is you, I want you to hear this. You are not inconsistent. You are simply human. Consistency does not come from motivation. It comes from identity. It comes from returning. It comes from forgiving yourself after every small fall. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to come back. Again and again, even for 1 minute, even for 1 breath. And this simple act, repeated many times, will change your life. 9. The takeaway. So the next time you start a goal, do not aim to be perfect. Aim to return. Aim to be gentle. Aim to show up in small ways. Because small steps are the secret heart of big transformations. And if you keep returning, you will stay consistent. And if you stay consistent, you will grow. And if you grow, your life will open in ways you never imagined. Thank you for listening to Today English Podcast. Take a deep breath. Feel proud of yourself for being here. And remember, you are someone who returns. You are someone who shows up. You are someone who grows slowly, gently, and consistently. Daniel did not know it at the time, but the real journey began on an ordinary Wednesday morning, a morning that looked simple from the outside, but felt heavy from the inside. Because this was the moment when he truly understood that consistency is not a straight road, but something much more human, much more emotional, and much more unpredictable. He woke up to the soft gray light coming through his curtains, the kind of light that makes the world look gentle but also slightly sleepy, and as he sat at the edge of his bed, rubbing his eyes and trying to wake up, he felt that familiar whisper in his mind again. The whisper that said, "It's okay, you can skip today." It was a quiet voice, not loud or dramatic, but warm and tempting, like a soft blanket inviting him to stay still. For a moment he almost agreed, almost went back to sleep, almost forgot the promise he had made to himself. But then something inside him, something that had been slowly growing over the past days, pushed forward. It wasn't motivation, he wasn't excited. It wasn't discipline, he wasn't feeling strong. It was simply a small sense of responsibility to himself, a small voice saying, "Just show up." Even for a moment. And so he sat up, stood slowly, walked to the kitchen, and made a cup of warm tea. He held the cup with both hands as the steam rose gently, and he whispered to himself, 5 minutes. Just 5. With that small agreement, he sat by the window again, opened the same English audio lesson, and pressed play. The first minute felt slow. The second minute felt easier. By the third minute, he was listening without thinking, just letting the words fill the quiet of the room. And by minute 5, he felt awake, calm, and proud, not because he did something big, but because he did something small on a morning when everything inside him wanted to stop. And that tiny victory changed the direction of the entire day. Later that afternoon, while walking home from work, Daniel thought about the nature of goals. He realized that goals are not heavy things. They become heavy when we carry them the wrong way. We often carry goals like giant stones on our backs, thinking we must run fast while holding something enormous. But maybe goals are more like small seeds, and consistency is the water. You do not pour a waterfall on a seed once and expect a tree. You water it a little every day, or even every other day, and slowly the seed becomes a root, and then a stem, and then something that grows on its own. As he walked, Daniel imagined his English practice like that seed. He didn't need to become perfect fast. He only needed to water it gently. And this simple thought made him feel lighter. When he reached his apartment building, he passed a small bench where an older man was feeding birds. Daniel had seen him before but never spoken to him. Today, however, the old man looked up and smiled, and Daniel, still feeling light from his walk, smiled back. "You look peaceful today," the old man said with a kind voice. Daniel laughed softly and replied, "I'm trying to be consistent with something." The old man nodded as if he understood immediately. "Consistency," he said, "is not a straight line. It is a heartbeat." Daniel didn't fully understand at first, but he felt the words like something important, something he would carry home. That evening, after dinner, Daniel sat again with his notebook. He opened the same page where he had written his promise, "I want to stay consistent." But this time he added a new sentence, "Consistency is like a heartbeat." And as he wrote it, he suddenly felt something click inside him. The old man was right. A heartbeat is not a perfect, straight line. A straight line means no life. A heartbeat rises and falls, but it continues. It does not stop completely. And this, Daniel realized, is what real consistency looks like. Some days you rise. Some days you fall. But you keep moving, even with small steps. You keep returning. The next week brought new challenges. Work became stressful again. A family member needed help. A friend asked him to come to a birthday dinner. Life became full and busy, as life always does. And again, Daniel found himself missing one day of practice. Then another. But unlike before, He did not panic. He remembered the heartbeat. So on. The third night, even though he felt tired and frustrated, he played an English listening lesson for only 3 minutes. He didn't take notes. He didn't try to understand every word. He just listened. And after those 3 minutes, he felt relief wash over him. He felt like he came back to himself. He realized that consistency was not about controlling life. It was about creating small spaces inside life. He didn't need an hour. He didn't need perfect conditions. He only needed a moment. And the moment was always there if he looked for it. One Saturday morning, while walking in the park, Daniel noticed a group of people practicing slow jogging. They moved gently, almost like they were walking with rhythm. A trainer stood in front of them saying, "Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast." Daniel stopped for a moment because those words felt strangely similar to his own journey. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. He realized that by slowing down, by taking gentle steps, he was actually growing faster than before, because before, he would rush, burn out, stop completely, and start again. But now he was steady, quiet, gentle. And this gentleness was giving him a new kind of strength. He sat on a bench and listened to another English story. And for the first time, he understood almost everything. Not perfectly, but naturally. He didn't have to push. He didn't have to fight. The words flowed into his ears like a soft river. And in that moment, he felt something powerful. Consistency builds confidence. Not because it makes you perfect, but because it shows you that you can trust yourself. Trust is stronger than motivation. Trust is deeper than excitement. Trust is what stays when everything else leaves. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's life changed quietly. His habits didn't feel like habits anymore. They felt like parts of his day. Listening to English became as normal as brushing his teeth. Taking small steps became as normal as breathing. And one evening, while talking to a friend, he surprised himself by answering in English without thinking. His friend looked at him with wide eyes and said, "Wow, when did you get so good?" Daniel smiled, not proudly, but softly. Because he knew the truth, he didn't get good suddenly. He didn't have one big moment. He grew in tiny moments, repeated again and again, gently and quietly, like drops of water shaping a stone. But even with all this progress, Daniel still had days when he felt tired or unmotivated or discouraged. And on those days, he remembered the old man and his words, "Consistency is a heartbeat." So instead of forcing himself, he chose kindness. Instead of quitting, he chose returning. And that choice changed everything. One evening, during a rainy night, Daniel sat by his window again, holding a warm cup of tea, listening to the sound of rain hitting the glass. The world felt slow and peaceful. And as he listened to a simple English story, he realized something. He no longer feared starting again. He no longer judged himself for small breaks. He no longer believed he needed to be perfect. He had learned to trust the process. He had learned to trust himself. He looked at his notebook, at the words he had written months ago, and smiled. "I want to stay consistent." And then below it, "Consistency is like a heartbeat." He added one more sentence, "And my heartbeat is steady." This was the moment Daniel understood that staying consistent is not about pushing harder. It is about breathing softer. It is about showing up gently. It is about giving yourself permission to grow slowly. And when you grow slowly, you grow deeply. And this, he realized, is how real change happens, not in loud moments, but in quiet ones. Not in big steps, but in small ones. Not in perfect days, but in returning days. And as the rain continued to fall outside, Daniel whispered to himself, "I will return tomorrow." And for the first time, he believed it completely. Daniel did not know that the next stage of his journey would begin on a day that looked like failure, a day that felt messy, unplanned, and imperfect in almost every way, because sometimes life teaches the most important lessons not when everything is calm and simple, but when everything feels noisy and confusing and completely out of your control. And that was exactly how this day began, with Daniel waking up already feeling late, already feeling rushed, already feeling like he had lost a small battle before he even opened his eyes, because his alarm did not ring, or maybe he turned it off without thinking, and now the morning sun was already bright, too bright, shining directly into his room like a reminder that he had overslept. And he sat up quickly, heart beating fast, knowing he had a meeting at work, knowing he had to hurry, and he did not even have time to make tea or sit by the window or breathe slowly like he usually did. And as he rushed to get ready, he felt the old voice returning, the voice that whispered, "See? This is what always happens. You are never consistent for long. You always fall back." It was such a familiar voice, a voice that used to control him, and for a moment, as he slipped on his shoes and grabbed his bag, he felt that heavy disappointment again, the feeling that he had failed before the day even started, the feeling that one break meant everything was broken. And he hated that feeling. It followed him down the stairs, into the street, onto the bus, sitting beside him like a shadow, whispering quietly that he was not the kind of person who could stay consistent. The day at work was long, full of unexpected problems, pressure, and noise, and by the time he came home, it was already dark, and he felt mentally tired and emotionally empty. He opened his door, dropped his bag onto the floor, and sat on the edge of his bed without turning on the light. For a long moment, he just sat there in the quiet darkness, feeling the weight of the whole day pressing onto his shoulders. He thought about skipping his English practice again. He thought about saying, "I'll start again tomorrow." He thought about giving himself permission to stop. But then, like a soft spark, he remembered something important, something he learned slowly over months of small steps. Consistency was not about perfect days. It was about returning, especially on imperfect days. So he reached for his phone, took a slow breath, and pressed play on a simple English audio for beginners. He did not sit straight. He did not take notes. He did not even turn on the light. He just listened in the dark for 1 minute, then 2, then 3. And as he listened, he felt his body relax, his breathing slow down, his mind soften. The heavy disappointment began to fade. The shame began to loosen. The whispering voice became quiet. And in that moment, Daniel understood something he had never truly seen before. The day you want to stop is the day consistency matters the most. Not because it makes you stronger, but because it keeps you connected to yourself. When the audio ended, he whispered, "I returned." And that simple sentence filled his chest with warmth, like a candle being lit inside him. It wasn't a big victory. It wasn't even a long practice. But it was real. It was honest. And it was enough. The next morning, when Daniel woke up, he felt different. Not perfect, not full of motivation, but deeply grounded. He made tea slowly, stood by the window, and watched the soft morning light move across the street. He didn't rush. He didn't scold himself for yesterday. He didn't try to make up for lost time. He just pressed play on another English story and let it flow gently into his ears. And at that moment, he realized something powerful. Returning is more important than catching up. Returning is more important than starting strong. Returning is more important than being perfect. Because returning builds identity, and identity builds consistency. Later that week, Daniel received a message from his friend, Maya, who asked if he wanted to join her for a short morning workout. At first, Daniel hesitated. He had never been someone who liked exercise. He had never been consistent with physical activities. But something inside him said, maybe this is another place where small steps can help. So he agreed. The next day, he met Maya at the park at 7 in the morning. The air was cool and fresh, and the sky still had soft colors from the sunrise. Maya smiled and said, "We'll go slow today." They started with a light walk, then a slow jog. Daniel felt tired quickly, but Maya kept saying, "Small steps, Daniel, small steps." And he realized that her voice sounded just like the voice he had been building inside himself. After their workout, they sat on a bench to catch their breath, and Maya said, "Consistency is not about how far you go. It's about not stopping completely." Daniel smiled, because he had heard these words before, in his own life, his own story. He realized that the lesson of consistency was everywhere, not just in English, not just in goals, but in relationships, in health, in daily habits, in all parts of life. That evening, he thought about how everything in life seems to follow the same pattern. You move, then you rest, then you move again. You try, then you fail, then you try again. You rise, then you fall, then you rise again. Life is not straight, it is circular. And consistency does not come from staying on the perfect path. It comes from returning to the path when you wander off. He wrote this idea in his notebook. Consistency is not staying on the path. Consistency is returning to the path. And as he wrote it, he felt something warm inside him, something like relief. For the first time, he didn't worry about the next day. He didn't fear another break. He didn't fear losing his progress. Because now he trusted himself to return. One Sunday morning, Daniel decided to take a long walk through the city. He walked past cafes, shops, families enjoying breakfast, people walking their dogs, the smell of warm bread from a bakery, the sound of children laughing at a playground, and all these small pieces of life made him feel peaceful. He listened to an English story during his walk, and he realized how much easier it felt now. The words that once sounded too fast now sounded natural. The sentences that once confused him now felt familiar. The expressions that once felt impossible now felt almost comfortable. And he understood why. Not because he studied for long hours. Not because he pushed himself hard. But because he returned again and again, even in small moments, even on difficult days, even when he felt tired or busy or imperfect. He realized that consistency is not a personality trait. It is a choice. A daily, gentle choice. As he continued walking, he passed a quiet library. Something inside him told him to go in. He entered the building, feeling the peaceful silence of books and soft lights. He walked between the shelves and found a small language learning section. There, he picked up a beginner's English storybook. The book was simple, with short chapters and friendly illustrations. He sat at a wooden table, opened the first page, and began reading slowly. And for the first time, he read an entire page without stopping, without translating, without feeling lost. A wave of emotion moved through him. He felt proud, not loudly, not in an ego-driven way, but in a soft, quiet way, like a warm secret held in the heart. He whispered to himself, this is because I stayed. He knew it was true. Progress comes slowly, then suddenly. Quietly, then all at once. And this moment in the library felt like a small miracle, the result of months of returning, months of showing up with kindness instead of pressure. Yet even with this quiet joy, life continued and new distractions arrived, unexpected tasks at work, visits from relatives, social events, days when he felt tired or bored or overwhelmed. But now the difference was clear. Consistency no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a home he could return to, a place inside himself, a calm space he could enter even for 1 minute. And because of this, he never truly fell off the path anymore. One night, while sitting on his balcony, watching the orange glow of sunset fade into deep blue, Daniel reflected on everything he had learned. He realized that consistency is not measured by how long you practice. It is measured by how gently you return. It is measured by how kind you are to yourself after you fall. It is measured by the quiet promise you make again and again, I will come back. He smiled softly, took a deep breath of the cool evening air, and pressed play on another English story, not because he had to, not because he wanted to be perfect, but because he simply enjoyed the feeling of growing slowly, gently, steadily. And that is when Daniel understood the true turning point of his journey. He no longer needed motivation. He no longer needed excitement. He no longer needed fear to push him. He had become someone who returns. And that identity, quiet, steady, and strong, would carry him for the rest of his life. Daniel did not realize that the deepest change in his journey would appear not during the quiet mornings or peaceful walks, but during a moment of emotional chaos, a moment when everything inside him felt uncertain. Because real change often hides inside confusion, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, and this moment began on a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel received an unexpected phone call from his manager, a call that pulled him into a long, stressful conversation about a project at work that had suddenly gone wrong, and as he listened to the situation unfold, he felt a rising heaviness in his chest, the kind of heaviness that makes your shoulders tense and your breath shallow, and when the call finally ended, he felt drained, like a part of his energy had been taken away in that single conversation. Normally, this would have been the kind of day that pushed him off his path completely, a day where he returned home exhausted and collapsed onto his bed, telling himself that he would try again tomorrow, a day where life felt too loud to listen to a single English word. But something inside him had changed quietly, slowly, invisibly over the past months, something that did not panic in stressful moments the way it used to, something that whispered inside his heart, you don't have to be perfect. You only have to return. So when he left the office, he walked slowly instead of rushing, breathing deeply instead of holding everything inside, and he let himself feel tired without judging himself for feeling tired. He walked through the city as the evening light softened, watching cars move past, watching people talking, laughing, crossing streets, living their ordinary lives, and for a moment, the world felt strangely calming. As he reached a quiet corner near a small park, he sat on a bench and took out his phone. He paused. His finger hovered over the screen. He didn't feel like listening to anything. His mind felt cloudy. His body felt heavy. But he remembered a truth he had learned many times. The hardest moment to return is the most important moment to return. So he pressed play. The voice from the English story filled the soft air around him, simple, slow, clear. He listened without forcing himself to understand every word. He let the language wash over him like gentle rain. And as he listened, something inside him began to calm. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. His mind started to settle. The words were not just language. They were softness, comfort, a familiar space that reminded him of who he was becoming. When the story ended, he whispered to himself, I'm still here. I didn't disappear. And that soft sentence felt like a small stone dropped into still water, creating ripples of peace inside him. Walking home afterward, he realized something powerful. His English practice was no longer about learning English. It had become a way to take care of himself. A place of stability. A space he could hold on to when the world felt heavy. He understood then that consistency is not a skill, it is a relationship. A relationship with yourself. A relationship with your future. A relationship with your small daily actions. And like all relationships, it must be gentle. It must be patient. It must allow mistakes. It must allow returning. That night, Daniel sat at his desk and wrote in his notebook again. He wrote, "Consistency is not a task. It is a friend." And as he wrote those words, he felt something shift inside him again, a deeper realization, a deeper peace. He remembered how he used to think consistency was a strict rule, something heavy, something that punished him when he failed. But now he saw it differently. Consistency was soft. Consistency was forgiving. Consistency waited for him, even on late nights, even on stressful days, even when he forgot it existed. It never judged him. It never blamed him. It simply opened its door every time he returned. Over the next month, Daniel's life became fuller. Not easier, just fuller. Work challenges continued. Family responsibilities increased. He helped a friend move to a new apartment. He handled extra tasks. He got sick for a few days. He had busy weekends, quiet evenings, moments of happiness, moments of sadness, everything woven together into the natural rhythm of life. And yet, through all of it, he stayed connected to his practice. Not perfectly, not with long hours, not with rigid routines, but with presence, with intention, with gentleness. Sometimes he practiced for 20 minutes, sometimes for 10, sometimes only for 1. But he always returned. Always. And because of that, something beautiful began to happen. His English started to feel like a part of him. Not something he was chasing, but something he was wearing, like a quiet second skin. One morning, while drinking tea on his balcony, he decided to test himself. He opened a news article in English, not a simple one, not a beginner one, but a real one, and he began reading slowly. At first, he struggled with a few words, but he kept going gently, without pressure. And to his surprise, he understood almost everything. Not perfectly, not quickly, but naturally. A soft wave of emotion moved through him, a mix of pride and disbelief and quiet joy. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the feeling rest. Inside his chest. "This is because of every small return," he whispered. It felt true. It felt real. Later that day, he met his friend Maya again for another gentle morning workout. As they walked through the park, Maya said, "You seem different lately. Calmer. More confident." Daniel smiled, feeling a warm truth behind her words. "I think it's because I stopped trying to be perfect," he replied. "I just try to be present." Maya nodded slowly, understanding exactly what he meant. They continued walking in silence, comfortable, breathing in the fresh morning air. Over time, Daniel noticed something even more surprising. Consistency in one part of his life slowly began to influence other parts. He found himself eating more mindfully, organizing his room more often, calling his family with more intention, creating small routines that felt natural instead of forced. He realized that consistency is not an isolated habit, it is a mindset, a gentle way of living. A quiet anchor that gives you stability in everything you do. One evening, as the sky turned deep purple, Daniel took a slow walk through his neighborhood. The streetlights were glowing. The air was cool. A soft breeze moved through the trees. And as he walked, he remembered the person he used to be, the person who started strong and quit quickly, the person who felt guilty when he failed, the person who waited for motivation like it was magic. And he felt compassion for that version of himself. Not shame, compassion. Because that person didn't know what he knows now. You don't need motivation to change your life. You need kindness. You need patience. You need the courage to return after every fall. As he reached a small bridge overlooking a quiet river, he stopped and leaned on the railing, watching the soft reflections of lights dance across the water. The world felt calm, almost magical. And in that stillness, he understood the deepest lesson of his journey. Consistency is not about controlling life. It is about flowing with life. It is about taking whatever the day gives you and still giving something small back to yourself. It is about trusting that small steps can build big changes. It is about believing that 1 minute still counts. It is about knowing that returning is enough. He closed his eyes, took a long, peaceful breath, and felt a warmth spread through his chest. He felt proud, not because he was perfect, not because he never missed a day, but because he learned to return with love instead of judgment. And with that breath, Daniel realized something beautiful. He was no longer just learning English. He was learning how to live. Daniel did not realize that the next chapter of his journey would begin not with a loud success or a big achievement, but with a soft, almost invisible moment on a calm morning, a moment that most people would never notice, but a moment that opened something inside him and showed him a new kind of strength, a strength that did not feel like power or confidence, but like peace, like stability, like a quiet center inside his chest that finally stopped shaking. And this moment started when he woke. Up before his alarm, not because he forced himself, not because he wanted to be productive, but because his body simply felt ready to wake. And as he sat up in bed, stretching slowly, he noticed something unusual. There was no rush inside him, no tension, no guilt about the past, no fear about the future. He looked at the soft morning light touching the edge of his curtains, and for the first time in a long time, he felt deeply present, fully inside the moment, without noise or pressure. He went to the kitchen, made his tea, held the warm cup between his hands, and simply breathed. It felt like standing in a quiet forest, surrounded by stillness and gentle air. And in that calm space, something inside him whispered, "You have changed." He didn't know how to describe it, but he could feel it, like a river inside him that used to move in sharp, unpredictable waves now flowing slowly, steadily, with a smooth rhythm that felt safe. He walked to his window, sat in his favorite chair, and pressed play on an English story. And something strange happened. It didn't feel like studying. It didn't feel like a task. It didn't feel like a responsibility. It felt like something he simply enjoyed, something that made his morning feel complete, like brushing his teeth or eating breakfast. And he realized that consistency had become part of who he was, not something he needed to remember, not something he needed to fight for, but something that lived quietly inside him. Later that day, after work, Daniel decided to visit the park again. It had become a peaceful place for him, a space where his thoughts could breathe. The sky was soft blue with a few white clouds slowly drifting across it, and children were laughing near the playground while a couple walked their dog along the path. Everything felt normal, simple, peaceful. Daniel sat on a bench near the lake, where small ripples moved across the water like gentle waves of silver. He listened to a more advanced English podcast this time, testing himself a little more, but in a gentle, curious way. And to his surprise, he understood almost everything. Not perfectly, but naturally. He didn't need to repeat sentences. He didn't need to pause. The language flowed, and he flowed with it. And as he listened, he felt gratitude, deep, warm gratitude for every small return, every gentle step, every imperfect day that brought him to this moment. He thought about how many times he had been tempted to quit in the past, how many times he believed he was not capable of staying consistent, how many times he judged himself harshly, thinking that he was weak or unmotivated or not the kind of person who could change. And now he realized how untrue those thoughts had always been. He wasn't weak. He wasn't inconsistent. He was simply human. He needed kindness, not pressure. Small steps, not giant leaps. Returning, not perfection. And because he learned to give himself these things, he had grown. A few days later, Daniel met with his sister for lunch. They talked about work, family, plans, little things, and big things. At one point, she asked, "How's your English practice going?" Daniel smiled softly, a calm smile that held months of quiet effort behind it, and he said, "It's going well. Really well." His sister looked at him for a moment and said, "You seem different. More steady." And he laughed because that was exactly how he felt, steady, balanced, grounded. They continued eating, and Daniel suddenly realized something important. Consistency had not only changed his English, it had changed his emotional life. He felt less reactive, less anxious, less overwhelmed by small failures. He had learned to breathe through difficulties, to trust slow progress, to feel peaceful even in imperfect moments. Consistency had given him emotional stability, a soft strength. That afternoon, on the way home, he stopped by a small bookstore. He wandered through the shelves until he found a section with English books. He picked up a beginner's book, then an intermediate one, then an advanced one, and as he held them, he realized something powerful. He was not afraid anymore. In the past, the advanced book would have terrified him. It would have felt like a symbol of everything he didn't know, everything he couldn't understand. But now it felt like an invitation, a challenge he would one day reach, a gentle promise that he would grow into it. And in that moment, standing between the shelves, he understood something deep and beautiful. Consistency builds confidence not by making you perfect, but by reminding you that you will arrive when the time is right. Growth is slow. Growth is patient. Growth is steady. And he was growing. That evening, Daniel cooked a simple dinner and sat quietly at his table, eating slowly. He felt good, not excited, not energetic, not dramatic, just good, grounded, peaceful. And in that peaceful space, he thought about the future. For the first time, the future didn't feel big or scary or far away. It felt close, gentle, reachable. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he trusted the direction. He trusted the process. He trusted himself. After dinner, he took out his notebook again. The same notebook he had used since the beginning of his journey. The first page still held the words, "I want to stay consistent." The next page said, "Consistency is like a heartbeat." And the third page said, "Consistency is a friend." Tonight, he wrote something new, "Consistency is who I am becoming." And as he wrote those words, he felt a soft warmth rise in his chest. He felt proud, not of the hours he studied, not of the progress he made, but of the person he was becoming. A person who could trust himself. A person who returned with kindness. A person who grew gently. As the weeks passed, Daniel's relationship with consistency continued to deepen. He found himself waking up with more energy, speaking with more confidence, listening with more curiosity. He noticed that he no longer needed reminders, no longer feared breaks, no longer judged himself for bad days. And one Sunday morning, he decided to do something special for himself. He packed a small bag, took the train, and traveled to a nearby village known for its peaceful nature trails. When he arrived, he walked along a quiet path surrounded by tall green trees, the sunlight softly passing through the leaves like golden rain. The sound of birds filled the air. The scent of pine and earth felt clean and calming. As he walked deeper into the forest, he took out his earbuds and played one of his favorite English stories. The narrator's voice blended with the natural sounds around him, creating a peaceful harmony. Daniel walked slowly, listening, breathing deeply, feeling present. He realized then that this moment, this peaceful walk in nature while listening to English, was something he had dreamed of months ago, back when learning English felt difficult, almost impossible. And now it was happening naturally, effortlessly, gently. He had created this moment through every small step, every small return. He reached a quiet clearing with a wooden bench and sat down. The air was cool, and a soft breeze touched his face. He paused the audio and closed his eyes. In the stillness, he felt gratitude for his journey, not just the successful parts, but the messy parts, the emotional parts, the tired parts, because each part had taught him something important. He realized that consistency had become a form of self-love, a way of saying to himself every day, "You deserve to grow." And that realization made his chest warm with emotion. He opened his eyes slowly, looked at the trees swaying gently, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." He wasn't speaking to the trees. He wasn't speaking to the world. He was speaking to himself. When he returned home that evening, he felt transformed not by a big event, not by a big achievement, but by the accumulation of small, gentle victories. He made a cup of tea, sat by his window, and listened to the soft sounds of the street below. And in that moment, he understood the quiet strength he had discovered inside himself, the strength to keep going even when days were difficult, the strength to return even when he felt tired, the strength to trust himself even when he was imperfect. It was a strength so gentle that he almost didn't notice it growing, but now he felt it deeply. A strength that would carry him far into his future. And that night, as he prepared for bed, Daniel whispered one last sentence to himself. "Consistency is not what I do. It is who I am becoming." And he slept with peace in his heart. Daniel did not know that the next stage of his journey would reveal itself during a very ordinary week, a week with nothing special planned, nothing exciting, nothing dramatic, just a normal routine of work, meals, sleep, and simple moments. But sometimes it is inside these simple moments where the biggest changes quietly rise to the surface, and this week began with a small surprise on a Monday morning when Daniel opened his eyes before the alarm again, just like he had done recently. But this time something felt even more natural, as if his body had fully accepted the rhythm of his life, a rhythm that once felt forced, but now felt like the gentle beat of a drum he carried inside his chest. He stretched slowly, smiled softly at the calm sunlight touching the wall, and as he sat up in bed, he felt something new. He felt like the kind of person who is consistent. He didn't have to say it out loud. He simply felt it. It lived inside him like a quiet truth. He made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and pressed play on an English story without even thinking. It felt automatic, like breathing. He didn't force himself. He didn't need motivation. He just showed up, naturally, calmly, peacefully, and as he listened, he realized that his mind was no longer fighting the process. It was flowing with it. Later that day at work, something interesting happened. During a meeting, his manager asked if anyone felt comfortable writing a short message in English to send to a partner company. Usually, this question would make Daniel nervous. He would avoid eye contact, hoping someone else would volunteer. But today, without fear, without hesitation, he said softly, "I can do it." His manager looked surprised, then pleased, and said, "Great, Daniel, thank you." And Daniel felt a small spark of pride inside him. Not a loud pride, not a pride that needed applause, but a warm, quiet pride that said, "Look how far you've come." After the meeting, when he sat at his desk to write the message, he typed slowly, carefully, but confidently. The words came naturally. He didn't freeze. He didn't panic. He didn't doubt himself. And when he finished, he read it again and smiled. It was simple, clear, correct. And in that moment, he realized that consistency had not just improved his English, it had changed the way he saw himself. He no longer felt like someone who was trying to learn English. He felt like someone who could communicate. someone who belonged in the language, someone who could use it in real life. That evening, he walked home with a feeling of calm strength. The sky had soft purple colors, the kind that make the world feel peaceful and slow. He listened to an English podcast as he walked through the familiar streets, passing small cafes, bright windows, people talking, people laughing, the soft sound of a bicycle bell somewhere behind him. The language flowed through his ears without effort, and he realized something beautiful. He could now understand English not because he memorized it, not because he forced it, but because he had lived with it, little by little, day after day, gently. And that gentle living had shaped him in ways he had never imagined. A few days later, Daniel received a message from Maya asking if he wanted to join her and a few friends for dinner. Normally, he would say yes without thinking, but that day he felt tired. Not in a negative way, just emotionally full, like he needed quiet time. In the past, he would force himself to go anyway, afraid of disappointing others. But now, after months of learning to listen to himself, he politely said, "I think I'll stay home today, but thank you." Maya understood and said, "No problem at all. Take care of yourself." And Daniel felt a surprising sense of peace. He realized that consistency had also taught him how to take care of his energy, how to listen to himself, how to set gentle boundaries. That night, he made a warm meal, sat in his soft chair, and listened to another English story while rain tapped softly against the window. It was one of the calmest evenings he had ever had. And as he listened, he breathed deeply and thought, "This is what stability feels like." A week later, something unexpected happened at work. His manager called him in and said, "Daniel, I've noticed your communication skills improving a lot lately, especially in English. Would you be open to joining a new project that requires some English communication?" Daniel felt a quiet shock inside him. Months ago, he would have been terrified. But now he felt ready. Maybe not perfect, maybe not confident in every situation, but ready to try. He nodded and said, "Yes, I'm open to it." His manager smiled. "I think you'll do great." And Daniel walked out of the office feeling taller, not because of the project, but because of the trust someone else had in him, a trust he had finally begun to build for himself. That night, back at home, he sat with his notebook again. He looked at the pages that held his journey, his first promise, his early thoughts, his struggles, his realizations. And then he turned to a new page and wrote, "I think I finally know who I'm becoming." He paused for a moment, letting the words settle, and then continued writing, "I am someone who returns. I am someone who grows slowly. I am someone who trusts myself. I am someone who stays." Reading those words, his chest filled with warmth. He felt emotional, not in a dramatic way, but in a soft, human way. Like he was meeting himself for the first time. A few days after that, he went to the park again for a long walk. The air was cool, and the sky was bright with soft clouds. As he walked, he listened to an English story about a traveler who found peace in small steps, and Daniel smiled because it reminded him of his own journey. He paused near a small pond, watching ducks glide across the water, creating gentle ripples. And as he watched that slow movement, he realized something that almost made him laugh. His progress had been exactly like those ripples, soft, slow, gentle, but always expanding outward, touching more and more parts of his life. Consistency had not only changed his English, it had changed his self-worth, his patience, his emotional stability, his belief in his ability to change. He sat on the same bench where he had once listened to English during a stressful day, and he remembered the feeling of heaviness he used to carry. He remembered the fear of failing again, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not staying consistent. And now, sitting on the bench months later, He felt none of those fears. They had faded like distant echoes. He whispered softly, "I'm not the same person anymore." And it felt true. Deeply true. He continued his walk until sunset began to color the sky with gold and orange. And as he walked home, he felt the world soften around him. He felt calm. He felt steady. He felt like he had grown, not because of big achievements, but because of countless small moments where he chose to return. That night, before going to bed, he pressed play on a short English story, not because he needed to practice, but because it made his heart feel full. And as he lay down, letting the gentle narration guide him into rest, he realized something beautiful. Consistency was no longer a goal. It was his identity. And as he drifted to sleep, he whispered the words that had become the quiet truth of his life. "I am someone who stays." Daniel did not realize that one of the most important turning points in his journey would begin on a quiet Saturday morning when he woke up feeling a little lost, not in a dramatic or painful way, but in a soft, confusing way. Like when you walk into a room and forget why you came, or when you start a task and suddenly feel unsure where to begin. The morning sunlight was warm and gentle, touching the corner of his pillow, and the world outside sounded calm and slow. But inside Daniel, something felt heavy. It was not sadness. It was not fear. It was simply a little fog, a cloud of uncertainty drifting quietly through his thoughts. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbed his eyes, and tried to understand why he felt this way. Nothing bad had happened. Nothing stressful. Nothing unusual. And yet, he felt disconnected, as if a part of him had taken a step back without telling him. He stood up slowly, made tea, and sat near the window like he usually did, but this morning the tea didn't taste the same, and when he tried to press play on an English story, his hand paused, unsure. His mind whispered, "Why do I feel this way? Where did my energy go?" And for a moment, he feared he was losing his consistency, losing the rhythm he had worked so hard to build. But as he sat there, breathing slowly, he remembered something important. Consistency is not perfection. Consistency is patience. He decided not to push himself. Instead, he closed his eyes and allowed the fog to exist, allowed the stillness to hold him, allowed the quiet to speak. And in that quiet space, he slowly realized something he had not noticed before. He had been growing so much, so steadily, so deeply, that his heart simply needed a moment to rest. Growth is not only movement. Sometimes growth is the pause between steps. And when he understood this, something inside him softened. He opened his eyes, took a slow breath, and whispered, "It's okay to feel this way." He stood up gently, put on his jacket, and decided to go for a walk, not to escape the feeling, but to walk with it. The streets were peaceful. A soft breeze touched his face. People walked in slow rhythms, an old man reading a newspaper on a bench, a mother pushing a stroller, a couple holding hands, a small dog trotting happily beside its owner. Daniel walked without direction, without a plan, simply letting his steps guide him. As he walked past a bakery, the warm smell of bread reminded him of childhood mornings when life felt simple and light. He let the memory warm him. Then he walked past a bookstore and paused, remembering the moment weeks ago when he held an English book without fear. That memory warmed him too. Slowly, gently, the fog inside him began to lift, like morning mist touched by sunlight. He continued walking until he reached a small cafe he had always noticed, but never entered. Today, something inside him said, "Go in." So he pushed the door open. A soft bell rang above his head. The cafe was quiet, cozy, with wooden tables, soft lights, and the sound of gentle jazz playing in the background. He ordered a tea and sat near the window. As he sipped slowly, He watched people outside walking in different directions, each one living a different life, each one carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own quiet dreams. And suddenly, Daniel felt connected to all of them. He realized that everyone has days where they feel lost, days with fog, days with quiet confusion. It was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign of being human. As he sat there reflecting, he heard the soft sound of English coming from the table next to him. A young woman was studying, reading a book out loud in a slow, careful voice. Daniel listened without meaning to, and he was surprised to hear how much he understood, even when the sentences were long. For a moment, he thought about how far he had come. Months ago, he would have been too afraid to listen to someone else reading English, afraid that he wouldn't understand, afraid that he would feel small. But today, he felt calm. He felt curious. He felt open. And in that quiet cafe, he felt another realization bloom inside him. Consistency had given him a new relationship with challenge. Instead of running away from what felt difficult, he now leaned gently toward it. He reached into his bag, took out his earbuds, and pressed play on a simple English story. He listened for a while, not studying, not forcing, just letting the words flow around him like soft music. And as he listened, the fog inside him dissolved completely. He felt clear again, present again, steady again. It was a gentle turning point, a moment that reminded him that even on uncertain days, he could return to himself, return to the process, return to the quiet strength he had built. And that return, that quiet return, was the heart of consistency. After finishing his tea, he stepped outside with a lightness he didn't expect. The world looked brighter, clearer. He walked slowly through the streets, letting the afternoon sun warm his face. As he walked, he realized something important. The journey of staying consistent is not only about discipline or motivation. It is also about understanding your emotions, listening to your energy, and giving yourself the space to breathe. Consistency is not a strict line. It is a gentle curve, a rhythm, a cycle of moving forward, resting, returning, and growing again. That evening, when he arrived home, he felt peaceful. He cooked a simple meal, cleaned his kitchen, and sat at his desk with his notebook. He opened to a new page and wrote, "Today I felt lost, but I found myself again by walking slowly." Then he wrote, "Consistency is not a straight path. It is a path that bends and curves, and that is okay." He smiled softly at the words. They felt true. After writing, he put on a short English video. He listened without pressure, without expecting perfection. He understood enough. He enjoyed the rest. And as the video ended, he whispered to himself, today was a turning point. He didn't mean a dramatic turning point, not a moment that changes everything instantly, but a gentle turning point, a moment that teaches you something important about who you are becoming. Before going to bed, he opened his window and let the cool night air fill the room. He looked at the stars, small and bright against the dark sky, and felt grateful. Grateful for the fog that had taught him to slow down. Grateful for the walk that helped him return to himself. Grateful for the quiet strength he had built over months of gentle steps. And as he closed the window and lay down to sleep, he felt something deep and comforting in his chest, a soft voice whispering, no matter how you feel, you know how to return. And that is your greatest strength now. And with that thought, Daniel closed his eyes and drifted into a peaceful sleep, ready for the next chapter of his journey. Daniel did not expect that the next chapter of his growth would begin with a small, unexpected message on a calm weekday afternoon, a message that appeared quietly on his phone while he was eating lunch at his desk, a message from a colleague named Clara who wrote, "Hey Daniel, I heard you've been improving your English a lot. Could you help me practice sometime? He stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a warm surprise spread gently across his chest. Months ago, no one would have asked him for help in English. He himself would have been too nervous, too unsure, too afraid of making mistakes. But now, someone saw him as a person who could help, and that thought made him smile. He replied with gentle confidence, "Sure, I'd be happy to help," and after sending the message, he leaned back in his chair and let the feeling settle inside him, a feeling that he was slowly becoming someone others could rely on. Someone who didn't just practice English for himself, but also shared small pieces of what he learned. He felt the quiet joy of realizing that growth, when nurtured gently and patiently, often spreads outward into the lives of others without trying. That evening, when he returned home, he sat at his usual spot by the window with a cup of tea in his hands, watching the golden light of sunset fall across the buildings outside. Something felt different tonight. Not louder, not stronger, but deeper, like the roots of a tree spreading slowly, quietly, beneath the ground. He pressed play on a new English story, but instead of listening passively, he found himself speaking along with the narrator, forming the words slowly, letting the sounds settle comfortably on his tongue. And he noticed something beautiful. The language no longer felt like foreign pieces he needed to memorize. It felt like a river flowing through him, shaping him gently with every sentence. He whispered phrases again, slowly, with curiosity, with joy, and he realized he had reached a place he once believed was impossible, a place where English felt natural. The next day, Daniel met with Clara during their break. They sat at a small table in the company cafe, each with a warm drink. Clara opened a small notebook filled with English phrases she wanted to practice. She spoke slowly, making mistakes, apologizing, laughing nervously. Daniel listened patiently, gently correcting her, encouraging her, reminding her that mistakes are part of the journey. As he guided her through sentences, he remembered how lost he once felt, how heavy learning had been for him, how afraid he had been to speak in front of anyone. And now here he was, helping someone else walk a path he had learned to walk with kindness. He felt proud, not in a loud or showy way, but in a soft, steady way, like a quiet flame burning inside his chest. It was the kind of pride that reminds you that progress is not just about reaching a new level, it is about becoming a person who can shine light on the path for others. Later that week, Daniel decided to take a short trip to a nearby lake, a place known for its peaceful water and gentle walking paths. He took the train early in the morning, watching the soft colors of dawn spread across the sky as the train moved through quiet fields and sleeping towns. When he arrived, the air felt fresh and cool, carrying the soft scent of water and pine trees. He walked slowly toward the lake, listening to the distant sound of birds and the gentle movement of water touching the shore. As he reached the edge, he paused and took a long, deep breath, letting the calmness fill him. He sat down on a wooden bench, took out his earbuds, and pressed play on an English story. The narrator's voice mixed with the natural sounds around him, creating a peaceful harmony that made his heart feel open and spacious. And in that moment, Daniel felt something deep and powerful inside him. He felt gratitude for every small step that brought him here, gratitude for every day he chose to return, gratitude for the gentle strength that consistency had built inside him. As he walked around the lake, he noticed families laughing, children running, an elderly couple walking hand in hand. Life moved in soft rhythms around him. And he realized that his own rhythm was changing too. He was no longer rushing toward progress. He was living inside it. He was no longer chasing the language. He was walking with it. He was no longer afraid of losing consistency because consistency had become part of his identity, something that lived inside him like a natural pulse. At one point, he stopped near a small pier that stretched out over the water. He sat at the edge, legs dangling above the gentle waves, and he watched the soft ripples move outward from his feet. And as he watched, he saw a reflection, not just of his face, but of who he had become. He saw someone patient, someone steady, someone who understood the value of gentle steps, someone who stayed. He whispered softly to himself, "I'm proud of you," and the words felt both strange and deeply true. They were words he had struggled to say for most of his life, words he had always saved for others, never for himself. But today, they felt right. On the train ride home, Daniel took out his notebook again. The pages held months of his growth, his promises, his struggles, his realizations, his softer days, his stronger days. On a new page, he wrote, "Consistency is a journey that deepens in silence." Then he added, "The more I stay, the more I become myself." He closed the notebook gently, holding it in his hands with a sense of deep connection. This notebook had become more than a record. It had become a mirror of his transformation. When he returned home that evening, the world felt calm. He made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and sat by the window as the street lights flickered on one by one outside. He listened to an English story without pressure, without expectations, simply because it felt like part of who he was now. And as he listened, he felt something profound move inside him, a sense of arrival. Not the arrival of finishing a goal, but the arrival of becoming someone new. Someone steady. Someone peaceful. Someone who had learned, through gentle steps and patient returns, how to stay. Before going to bed, he whispered softly into the quiet room, "I'm not only learning English. I'm learning myself." And as he lay down, he felt a soft wave of peace cover him, a peace he had earned through every small moment of showing up. And he fell asleep knowing that this journey, this deepening journey, was far from finished, but he was ready for every step that was still to come. Daniel did not expect that his journey of consistency and gentle growth would begin to ripple outward into areas of his life he had never imagined. And it all started on a quiet Monday morning when he woke up to the soft sound of rain tapping on his window. The world outside was gray and calm, and inside him, something unusual stirred. He felt a quiet energy, a soft readiness to embrace the day. In the past, rainy mornings made him sluggish, uncertain, hesitant to begin. But now he felt a small spark of anticipation. He got up slowly, stretched, made tea, and for the first time in months, he thought about not only his own growth, but how the habits he had built might touch others' lives as well. He pressed play on an English story, speaking along softly with the narrator, savoring each word, feeling the rhythm of sentences move naturally through his tongue, and as he did, he realized that the patience and consistency he had learned were not only helping him understand English, they were shaping his character, his patience, his empathy, and his ability to connect with people. The language had become a bridge, not just a skill. Later that morning, Daniel arrived at work feeling calm and steady. The rain had softened into a drizzle, and people moved slowly through the streets. During a team meeting, a new project was announced that required collaboration with English-speaking clients. In the past, Daniel would have felt nervous, anxious, even intimidated. But today, he simply listened, took notes, and when the chance came, spoke clearly, gently, confidently. His voice did not shake. He made small mistakes, but he corrected them without panic, with curiosity, with grace. His colleagues listened attentively, and Daniel felt a quiet warmth grow inside him. He realized that his consistency in learning, his patient daily steps, were beginning to show in his actions. The English he had practiced, the habits he had formed, the gentle courage he had nurtured, these were now visible to others. And he felt something new, the ripple effect of his journey. What he had once thought was private, something only for himself, was quietly touching the world around him. That afternoon, Daniel received a message from Clara, the colleague he had begun helping with English. She wrote, "Thank you for your help today. I feel more confident already." Reading this, Daniel felt a soft swell of pride, the same quiet kind he had learned to recognize months ago, not the pride that seeks applause, but the kind that warms your chest when you see someone else grow because of your patience and guidance. And he realized that teaching, helping, supporting someone else was another layer of growth he had never expected. His English practice had become more than a skill. It had become a way to connect, to share, to give. That night, he reflected in his notebook, "Consistency doesn't just change me. It can change others too." He smiled softly at the thought. A few days later, Daniel decided to take a walk through the park near his apartment. The rain had passed, leaving the air clean, fresh, and fragrant. Trees glistened with droplets of water, the ground shimmered under the soft light, and puddles reflected the gray clouds moving slowly across the sky. He walked slowly, deliberately, noticing small details he had once overlooked, the sound of a bird's wings brushing the air, the scent of damp earth, the tiny movement of leaves in the breeze. And as he walked, he thought about the ripple effect of consistency. Just as the puddles reflected the sky above, his consistent actions reflected who he had become. And just as one stone thrown into water creates ever-expanding ripples, the small steps he had taken each day were beginning to influence not only his life, but the lives of those around him, in ways he could not yet see completely, but could feel deeply. Later that week, Daniel met a friend for coffee. They talked about life, work, challenges, and dreams. When the topic turned to English learning, Daniel listened carefully, then shared his experiences, speaking slowly, clearly, and gently, not trying to teach, just sharing what had helped him. His friend's eyes lit up and they said, "I've been struggling to stay consistent. But hearing how you approach it makes it feel possible." And Daniel felt that quiet warmth again, the ripple effect. He realized that the patience, persistence, and self-compassion he had nurtured could be shared naturally, without pressure, without expectation, and yet it had the power to inspire. His journey was no longer only about him. It was about the connections his growth could create, the calm strength he could model, the encouragement he could provide. And that understanding made him feel humble, grateful, and deeply fulfilled. That weekend, Daniel decided to revisit the small lake he had discovered weeks earlier. The water was calm, soft mist rising from the surface, the air filled with quiet sounds of nature. He walked along the wooden pier, stopping occasionally to watch small ripples form as ducks glided across the water. He thought about his journey, every morning he had woken up, every tea he had sipped while listening to English stories, every step he had taken outside even when he felt tired, every small correction, every gentle conversation, every tiny victory. And he realized that the lake reflected his life perfectly. Just like the water, his growth had been slow, steady, patient. The ripples spread outward naturally, affecting more than he realized, touching the lives of others quietly, gently. And he whispered softly, "Consistency is not just for me. It is for everything I touch." That evening, back home, he wrote in his notebook, "Consistency is like water. It moves slowly. It flows gently. It touches everything in its path." He added, "My growth is not just for me. My actions, my habits, my patience, they ripple outwards." And as he closed the notebook, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He realized that the journey of staying consistent was not about perfection, achievement, or comparison. It was about becoming someone steady, someone reliable, someone kind, someone who could. quietly influence the world around them through presence, patience, and gentle persistence. And that realization filled him with peace and a quiet joy that did not need applause or recognition, only acceptance and awareness. As he lay down to sleep that night, Daniel reflected on the ripples his life now created. He thought about Clara, his friends, his colleagues, the strangers in the park, the gentle words he had spoken, the small acts of care he had offered. Each of these small moments, when guided by consistency, had become part of something larger than himself. And as he closed his eyes, letting the soft sounds of the night lull him to rest, he whispered, "I am becoming someone whose life ripples outward with kindness, patience, and presence." And with that thought, he drifted into a peaceful sleep, ready to continue his journey of growth, gently, steadily, and with purpose.